Good morning. We are shooting this versus having you meet with all of these faculty live. We're in the studios at UNO TV, and we are going to talk about the graduate program, how it works, how it functions, and some brief history around it. We've got 3 members of the faculty and administration here with us today, and so I'm going to go around, introduce each of them in turn, and then I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions, and we'll go from there. So, Hugh, why don't you give us your name, your area of research, and what your current administrative position is?
So my name is Hugh Riley. I'm the director of the School of Communication. My area of research really have 2 areas. I have advertising and public relations, and I also do research on newspaper history. What was the rest of the question?
I think you nailed it all. Actually,
okay.
You're good to go. Perfect.
Okay.
Deb, how about you?
I'm Deborah Smith-Howell. I am I'm obviously a professor of communication, but also Dean of Graduate Studies and Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs here at UNO. And my area, in communication, is primarily political communication, rhetorical criticism, communication education. I've also one of the ways I've kind of stayed engaged as I've moved into administration is really focusing on civic engagement and community engagement.
That's awesome. Mike?
Michael Hilt. I am a professor in communication. I'm also Dean of the College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media. Research areas, when I've had time to do research, hasn't been lately, would focus on broadcasting, broadcast education, aging in America, and what that means for media throughout the country.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you. So back to Hugh. So where do you see your role as the director for the school within the graduate program? How do you see that fitting in?
It's really kind of a multi-level thing, because I think I teach the students that I teach that I can identify as potential good graduate prospects and try to encourage them to talk to the GPC, to you, about enrolling in grad school. I also think that I kind of serve as a support for you as the GPC.
Okay.
And it's all part of my role as director, both sides, both undergraduate and graduate side. So it's just kind of to show them that there's a natural progression to that graduate degree if they are interested.
Awesome. And then what do you see as the history of the graduate program as you know it?
Well, this is my 20th year, which is probably only more than you, the only one.
Yeah.
But I can remember when I was first here, I think we typically had 70 to 80 graduates, something like that. So there's been kind of a shift where the numbers were going down. But I see recently, in the last year or so, we've started to see, an increase, a small increase come up, and it's been gradual. And we just got some news today about some potential for more graduate students. So I think the future is bright, and I think we have some wonderful faculty. We've just hired 2 groups of faculty in the last 2 years, which is really going to enhance our graduate offerings, a variety of skills and backgrounds that they bring. So I think the future is bright, and I'm excited about that because we have a lot to offer.
Awesome. Next question I've got is, so what are some strategies for success? So both from you being an instructor and working with graduate students, but also you were a graduate student at one point, and you've seen what our graduate students are going through now. So what do you think some success strategies would be for new students and second years of returning students?
Something that I've done, and I'm sure other faculty do this as well, is you kind of identify students in your undergrad classes that could potentially be grad students, and you look for an opportunity to take them aside and talk to them and say, hey, have you thought about this? I mean, I think and a lot of times they're surprised. Well, no, I never thought about that. And I can relate my own experiences, which was a kind of an epiphany I had on a business trip on an airplane, and realizing that graduate school didn't have to be an MBA. I could get a graduate degree in communication or other areas as well. And I think sometimes, so the strategies are really about what's available, what it can do for you, why would you choose to pursue a graduate degree, and it was, to me, it was an offhand decision that I made, kind of a spur-of-the-moment decision that I made, and it changed my life dramatically. It changed my career path. It changed my prospects. It changed everything. And it can have that kind of an effect. Right. So that's the kind of story I like to tell them.
Cool. Thank you. Anything else you want to add before I move around the bend here?
Nice sandals.
Thank you. Hey, man, you know me. I'll be in Berks until I have to wear Keens, and that's about it. So, well, then we're going to move along with the same questions, and then I do want to make sure we open the floor up at the end, just to kind of have an open conversation about things. So Deb, to you. So, what is your role within the graduate program, both in the school as well as in your capacity overall on campus?
Yeah, and I don't have personally a lot of direct involvement with the program now, because it just really I'm not really able to teach. I tried it one time, don't think I did it very well given what I would consider how I want to teach. So it really is about what is the role of graduate studies at UNO. And I think one of the things for everyone, that it's important for us to remember is that there's one graduate college for the University of Nebraska. So that the graduate college, I'm the campus dean, but I am one of 4 campus deans, and even the 4 campus deans meet periodically, and the provost oversees the entire graduate college for the 4 campuses. And graduate studies is the area that provides the academic support, student support for the programs themselves, the graduate program chairs in particular, as well as all of the students. I mean, we work with the graduate students from inquiry to graduation. So, but we work in tandem with our graduate programs. So, the main contact a lot of times is through the graduate program chair with you and your role. We do offer a lot of things for students, and I do want, and that there'll be a graduate resource guide that's mailed to every single, usually we do it to new students. We're sending it to every UNO graduate student this year. So everybody will be getting that in the mail, and it's a resource guide targeted specifically for graduate students so that they see some of those resources. So the Graduate Studies Office, will do the monitoring, but we also provide, hopefully some travel grants when we're able to travel again, as well as scholarships, theses. We oversee the graduate assistantships, trying to connect graduate students to different kinds of resources. I help fund writing assistance in the Writing Center. We are working with UNMC, Lincoln, and Kearney to open up professional development opportunities for all graduate students across the 4 campuses. So a lot of those are being done virtually, but trying to expand those types of things. We obviously support the graduate assistants in a number of different ways. We oversee the Graduate Council and the academic policies and procedures. Okay. So, work closely with those, with the programs. A lot of what we're focusing on now too is really trying to help shape, the recruitment, the marketing, trying to support the programs as we're reaching out. I am enormously pleased with the kind of enrollments that we're having right now with our graduate programs, the interest that we're seeing in some of our new opportunities, and I absolutely agree with Hugh. I think, of course, I'm a little bit biased, right? But, I do think communication is the most important discipline, so that we really should be in the center of some of these really exciting things that are happening.
Awesome. Thank you. And then to the history question. So, given that you've, as Hugh has pointed out, you've been in the school for longer, on campus longer, what do you know of as the history of the graduate program?
Well, I probably know a lot about the history because part of it is it interests me in a lot of ways, trying to understand the discipline. One of the classes that I actually developed originally was the foundation seminar in comm studies, and so the history of the discipline is interesting to me. But I came in '89, so I'm actually starting my 32nd year at UNO this coming year, which is just unreal to me to think about it. But the master's in particular has a really interesting history because the then Department of Communication was formed in 1975 with the merger of what was then the departments of speech and journalism. Sure. And we believe, we can't completely document it, but we're really sure if we weren't the first, we were among the very first in the country to combine voluntarily the speech communication and the mass communication. And it was a choice of the faculty at the time. They were in different colleges that came together. And it came around really two areas. One was graduate education and one was broadcasting, because broadcasting was in speech. But journalism, all thought perhaps we should do something with broadcasting, right? So those were the two things. And journalism didn't have a master's, but speech did.
Okay.
So those were the two areas that brought them together. We wanted a school back in 1975. But couldn't get it through all the different processes and all. So, we were finally officially a school in the spring of 2004. And, I always thought when we were writing those documents that we were just trying to build on, it was like, it just took us a while, right, to get to it. But so what happened was when the departments came together, the masters went from a master's in speech to a master in communication. And that's when we deliberately, and obviously I wasn't here then, but the way I understand it from the faculty at the time, and we did have, I overlapped with a number of those, that they very intentionally made this a master's degree that was one that would weave together the mass comm, speech comm, that also would be one that would be important for working professionals, right, as well as providing that foundational kind of research. So the focus of this master's from the very beginning was that very integrated, practical, but research-based, sure, right? And honestly, that was one of the reasons why I came to UNO. What I liked about the program, because my background, while primarily comm studies, included an awful lot of journalism, mass communication theory. I would never teach, one of the productions, but the mass communication, political science, sure, and that ability to teach across those areas, right, and to work in a master's program that really valued that range of how we approached it. And I really liked the idea of communication is a practical discipline. That's one of the things that it makes a difference in the world. And so the idea of being able to be part of a master's program that did that very intentionally, I thought was really important.
I love the fact that we've got that A on the record right now, and B, it's one of the reasons that attracted me here.
Yeah.
Because my background moves kind of between high school teaching and speech and debate coaching and corporate training and all these things. And I was attracted to UNO when I applied here for some of the same reasons you're discussing, yeah, which is that the MA program in particular, and now the certificate program, you don't have to be comm studies, you don't have to be journalism or broadcasting. The idea that it is intentionally together and you get to craft your way through that, yep, I think is one of the best reasons to consider a program like this. And I think even going back when we talk about historically about the School of Comm, how they were gunning to be a school when the idea of that didn't exist nationally or in the academy. That was just not a conversation that was going on. That foresight, I think, allowed us to establish ourselves now, in a nice kind of sweet spot.
Yeah, I think that's, I just have always been impressed with some of the vision that was that those faculty were having, absolutely, in the 1970s. And because it wasn't easy at that time to do that. And they did a remarkable job of it. And I think, I always felt like we were always building on a lot of that. Now, you don't stay the same, right? No. Lots of things change. But the idea that it actually gave us a foundation to be innovative, to create change, and not to have to just like the way it's always been done.
I think about in the 80s when Ferment in the Field happened, and how one of the arguments that was happening in Ferment in the Field, which was this thing going on across the discipline, was that there were camps that said, no, we must stay traditional and only you study classical rhetoric and that's all you do, and never shall you ever walk into a broadcast studio. Yeah. And others were saying, wait a minute, rhetoric by its design is supposed to be flexible and move within histories, right, and across histories. And so, the fact that in the 70s they were saying, we got to make this, we got to be thinking about this, and then they almost saw it coming down the pipe in the 80s, and then now that we're seeing it here. It's a nice progression to watch happen. The next question, strategies for success. You've seen a lot of grad students in a myriad of roles. So
I have.
what kind of advice would you give for new students, returning students on success?
Sure. Yeah, this is one of the things, the first thing, I think, and hopefully, you've already thought about this even before you take your first class, but you got still some time if you haven't. The thing about going for a graduate degree is to recognize how different it is from an undergraduate degree. And one of the things that I have that's been interesting to me as I don't have a good word for it, as Dean of Graduate Studies, is when I've had difficult conversations with graduate students that it's not working out, a lot of times it's because of what they thought graduate school would be.
Sure.
And so the better that we're able to talk about that, I think the better it is. The great thing about graduate school is you've chosen, it is focused, and it is in an area that you've chosen. So there is no gen ed in grad school. You don't have to worry about those kinds of things. You should be taking classes that inherently interest you because you chose this particular degree. Now, some of them may have elements that maybe aren't your favorite, but the great thing about a graduate course is typically you get to shape some part of it related to a project or a paper. So even if it's not your favorite kind of subject, you can at least shape the project. I can remember one course I took when I was at the University of Texas, and I loved the class, but it was really focused on interpersonal interaction, which is not my big thing, right? I like political communication and things like that. I was doing conversation analysis. So I could learn all of it, and then I applied it to a press conference, a presidential press conference, and I was able to use all of the techniques, and the professor let me, right? Wasn't his favorite thing that I was doing that, but he was very supportive, and that's the beauty about graduate school. But you got to realize that it is so different than undergraduate. And part of it is that chosen, that passion, that ability to focus in particular kinds of areas. At the same time, it's different in that it's just not an accumulation of courses, right? And that you are moving towards a level of expertise. So, if you just think you're going to tick some boxes and you're going to get a master's degree, that's not going to work. So you've got to think about how do you integrate across, and how do things fit together, and how do you get to that culminating experience, whether it's a thesis or a project or the comps. I mean, there are multiple ways to do that, but you've got to have some kind of synthesizing integrative experience. So you want to think about this kind of more holistically. So honestly, the first strategy for success is to recognize what graduate school is, right? And so I think that's a really important part of it. The other thing is, it's a lot of work. And there's a lot of reading, and there's a lot of work, but it's on things that you care deeply about, and trying to give yourself that space. If you're working full-time, know that your recreation is probably going to be studying for a period of time. If you are a full-time graduate student or a graduate assistant, it is a full-time job. So don't think that that's on the side and that you're kind of just, So you want to give yourself that kind of space to be able to do the work. But the other part about doing that is, you're going to be assigned huge chunks of reading across 1 or 2 classes, or maybe even 3 and for some folks. You got to learn how to read strategically, right? This is not the leisurely absorb every word, understand it. You got to give yourself, literally there are strategies for how to learn to read large volumes of material in an efficient kind of way. So those are some of the first 3 things I'd be thinking about.
So time management, manage your time, and this is not undergrad.
Yeah, well,
right.
It's not just time management, it's how you go about that.
I like
but
it.
Yeah, it's an attitude too.
Excellent. And then anything else you want to add at this point before I move on to Mike?
And we'll probably come back to it in the conversation, but in case we don't, or maybe just this to make sure that we do, is always be asking questions and thinking about, you should never be afraid to ask. about anything, because there are an awful lot of people here at this institution, in the School of Communication, the graduate program, on the campus at a whole, that our focus is that we want our students to succeed. And if we need to know what's going on, what people are thinking, what they're concerned about. So never, ever hesitate to speak up.
Awesome. Thank you. Mike, your turn.
Sure.
So, first question, what is your role within the Graduate Studies program in the School of Communication?
Well, before I get to that, I don't know if I like it, but it's the way it is now because it's a fact. So I'll be beginning my 33rd year at UNO this fall. And know if you had asked Mike in 1988, would he still be at UNO and doing what I'm doing today, he would have laughed at you. And sometimes I want to join him. I have been at UNO 33 years. I am a professor of communication. My role within the School of Communication, specifically the graduate program, is interesting. We do have a graduate college, and we have a dean of graduate studies. So the graduate programs, I don't know if they fall mostly under you or it's a split.
Yeah, it's very split because you get to pay the faculty. I don't have any faculty. I have all of the other stuff.
So we've jumped immediately to budgeting.
There we go. Okay.
I guess I would say that is a prime concern of mine as dean of the college. Perhaps a little bit of background about the college, because you're going to have students who haven't been at UNO before. So our college is made up of 3 schools: School of Communication, School of Music, School of the Arts. The arts would include theater, writer's workshop, and art history. We have a footprint in 6 different buildings, so we're the geographically challenged college at UNO. But having said all of that, when you think about what's in this college, they all tie together. Right. Which goes back to the creation of this college. We're also the youngest college on campus, formed in 2005. Way back when, in those 33 years I've been here, I was graduate program chair in communication. So one of the benefits for the students is that they have a dean of graduate studies and the dean of the college, and we're both communication faculty.
Right.
And in fact, I just agreed to it this week, so I'll be serving on a project committee in communication.
Yes, you will.
That doesn't happen often,
No.
and I'm happy when it does because it gives me something to do other than add numbers, math. It's been an interesting time here at UNO. I think the School of Communication graduate program is one of those programs that should be a beacon for students. If you're part of this program, you should be excited about everything that goes on in the School of Communication, but the larger in this college.
Right.
You're a member of this college within the graduate program, and we have 3 graduate programs in CFAM. School of Communication, there's a Master's of Music, and then the Master of Fine Arts in Writing, the low residency program.
All right. Excellent. So the next question. As you know it, as you said, you're coming on your 33rd year.
Yes.
How do you see the history of the grad program in the School of Communication?
I would say this, and it's somewhat echoing what you've heard already. This was a program, where we had 70 to 80 majors, and we're coming back from that. I've looked at the enrollment numbers specifically for this fall in terms of the courses, look very strong.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the beginning. We need to keep on that trajectory. There are opportunities from community partners, and there will be more about that coming up in the next few days and weeks. But this is an opportunity to grow the program even beyond what it's been, and we need to take advantage of that.
Okay.
I don't like to keep the dean hat on too long, but there are times when I have to, and usually this time of year is one of those times when you look at enrollment numbers and budgeting and that sort of thing. But strengthening our position across campus through enrollment is a path to also raise the profile of the program. Yeah. And I think that's very important.
which is why I try to remind the grad students to enroll early as opposed to last
Yes.
minute, because that helps everything, not just make sure they have the class seat, but it helps the program, again, to your point, demonstrate, and establish themselves within the larger conversation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right, strategies.
Again, it would be echoing what we've heard already, and I loved what Deb mentioned in terms of, you're focused. Graduate school is different than undergraduate school. My advice, and this seems fairly simplistic, but I'll say this. You're going to have assignments, whether they're papers, projects, whatever they might be, in all of your graduate courses. Save everything.
Yes.
Save from the very first class onward, save everything, because you never know. You'll get toward the end and maybe you're focusing on that topic for your project or your thesis. And you're going, I did some research on this topic and it was way back when. And rather than having to go back and do it all over again, you might have it somewhere.
Right.
Save everything. That is so important. And start looking for those connections. As Deb put it, it's not necessary that you know what your topic is going to be in your first class. It doesn't hurt. Right. But if you don't, that's okay. Yeah. Second, third class, you'll begin to see things that connect. And you go, no, this is a topic that really interests me, that I would want to devote, a lot of time to researching. And I'm going to do that. And maybe find a way to incorporate that idea, that topic, even in a minimal way, with every paper you write from there on for every class that you do. So you're building a foundation.
Absolutely. Excellent. I don't know if this happened to any of you all. Did you all change your thesis or PhD topic, like either midstream or second year or something like that?
So I had a wonderful idea for my master's thesis. So I, for my graduate program, went to the University of Kansas. My thesis advisor worked in network broadcast journalism, but then he moved on from that to write westerns. So that was interesting. And so, we were talking one day, and I'm interested in broadcasting, and that's my background and when I teach, and so I'm very familiar with our TV studio that we're using today. And I thought, well, minor league baseball radio play-by-play. Because way back when, just like we're seeing now with COVID-19, the announcers wouldn't go to the games. They'd reenact the games in a studio. So they'd have to have wood to reenact the slap of the bat and all those sorts of
Radio
things.
plays.
And so I thought, that would be wonderful. And I tracked down, like I said, I went to University of Kansas, so in Topeka, they had a minor league team when it was about 30 minutes away, and they would broadcast the games. And so I thought, I've got a way in. And the more research I did, the more that I found out that it was just a horrible topic. Why would I even think this would be successful? And I went back to the thesis advisor, and I told him all of this, and he goes, yeah, I know, but I wanted you to figure that out.
Yep.
So I moved on to another topic. It was a mutual agreement for a topic. I can't say that it would have been one that I would have chosen, but it worked out well for me.
Okay.
And so that's what I remember about that. The PhD, the dissertation, that all came together just from my own background in broadcasting. And like I mentioned at the beginning, my interest in aging and gerontology, it all kind of worked together.
Awesome. Hugh, you had your...
Yeah, I started with, I thought I had this great idea, and I was taking one of my first grad classes, one of the first, I believe it was Bob Carlson's class. And you had to basically write the kind of your review and all that kind of stuff first. So I had this idea of doing a comparison between the gatekeeping practices of print and broadcast media. And I thought, well, I'll go, because I used to work for a newspaper, and I used to work in broadcast, well, kind of peripherally in broadcasting. And I see you go into the rooms where you sit there and you decide what stories we're going to cover today. I thought, this would be kind of cool. And it was really pretty boring. And I thought, I'm not all that interested in this at all, but I've already done all this work on it, so that's probably what I'll do. And then I don't remember what triggered this, but I've had a fascination with Native American history and culture all my life. And I worked for a couple of newspapers, and I thought, somehow I got the idea, would it be fun to go back and look at the way these frontier newspapers, like in South Dakota and Kansas and Nebraska and Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, covered the Indian Wars of from 1860 to 1890. And looking at how they did it opposed to the big New York or big Chicago newspapers. And so that's what I started working on, and I just loved it. And so I had the passion for it.
Right.
Because I think it's very important, your thesis topic should be something you care about. I think far too often it's like what's easy, or not necessarily easy, but what's convenient. And so you do it, and you do fine, but if it's something you really, really care about,
Right.
and you find, and you're fascinated with doing the research, it just makes it so much more enjoyable and so much more productive, and ended up turning into a book and all kinds of things. So it was a wonderful decision, and that when that something clicks, and you go, oh yeah, I'm gonna write about this, and you really care about it, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think that's really important, is that interest. I mean, it goes back to graduate school, just why you're getting a master's degree. With my thesis, I mean, actually most people wouldn't believe what my thesis is. My master's was more focused on what we at the time LSU called communication theory. And so my master's thesis is actually language behavior indicators of cognitive complexity. It's a multiple regression analysis testing the construct validity of the 8-role cognitive complexity test using using a program called syntactic language computer analysis. So it was a very early computerized content analysis program that actually, when you take your methods class, I had ratio level data, thank you very much. So nobody knows I even know what those words mean.
I was going to say, hello, rhetorician, how are you?
Yeah. So, but I also am kind of a number crunching rhetorician. My dissertation had 11,000 lines of data that tested the scope of UNO's capacity at the time to even run frequencies. With my master's thesis, it really was because of the advisor that I was at that transition point, right? When you talk about ferment in the discipline type of thing. Because when I went to LSU, I thought I was going to do rhetoric, right? And then when I realized that all their rhetoric classes were like the rhetoric classes of the 50s and early 60s, I'm like, I see no future if I do this, right? So I had one person who had picked out one of those very classical, kind of rhetorical biographies, and I was going to be assigned, I forgot, somebody to do it. And so I switched, and I moved into more of the comm theory because I thought that was more relevant. But I took enough hours that I could have written my thesis in either way, but I went more with the comm theory, and I am fascinated by language acquisition, how we use language. So it worked out fine, but I really was not going to stay in that area very long, right? So then with the dissertation, I stayed out for a few years, and when I went back to Texas, I had kind of coalesced around political communication. But the dissertation really emerged. It was fascinating. There were 2 projects that I was working on. We were doing an internship. I was doing a research internship where we were doing this giant content analysis of Time magazine articles, and we're coding for all of these different things. And so one of the things that I was coding for were references to, we had the whole list, but whether it was presidents or the different people in government, all kinds of stuff. The thing that kept coming up was references to past presidents. It's like, Time's not a history magazine. Time's supposed to be about current events. Why the heck do I have Thomas Jefferson? Why do I have George Washington? Why is Lyndon Johnson? I mean, we were doing it over a big span of time from like 45 to 80, but why was the past always showing up? Then I was in about the same time, I was in a presidential rhetoric seminar with Kathleen Jamison and Rod Hart. They were co-teaching this. And so they gave us, everybody got 1 year of the presidential papers, and were told to go write a 5-page something interesting. And so I got 1981, Ronald Reagan's first year as president. So I had the whole volume of everything Ronald Reagan said for 1 year. And as I kept reading it, it was like Ronald Reagan came in, change, going to be different, there's a whole new sweep, whatever. Who does Ronald Reagan talk about that whole first year? But John Kennedy, Harry Truman, Franklin Roosevelt, all in a very positive kind of way. Why does the past keep showing up? And that's how I got my dissertation.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so it just kept growing from there, and the dissertation ended up being its rhetorical uses of the past. And so what I looked at were high school government textbooks from 1945 through 1985, the dominant ones, because high school government textbooks, Time magazine, and presidential speeches for how they used these references to the past to construct the present, the rhetorical uses of the past.
I'm just in awe and jealous you got to take a class from Kathleen Jamison.
I took several from Kathleen. Kathleen was, she was a force of nature. The thing about Kathleen was she was chair of the department when I was there. And so what I remember about her, if you ever, I haven't seen her in a while. She still shows up some on television and things like that. But she was always so busy that she, I learned, and I could walk pretty fast, and I learned to write and walk. So if Kathleen was going somewhere and she let me go and I need to ask her questions, I'd just run along beside her doing that. But she was great, and she actually influenced a lot about what I did in the department and what I do with grad studies. Kathleen is the one who really emphasized the importance of graduate students attending conferences, and she helped fund us to go. And so when I was the department chair, school director, I did everything I could to get our students, undergraduate and graduate, to conferences. Sorry about that. And I do the same thing. That's one of the reasons why, as Dean of Graduate Studies, I sometimes say if we don't have a phone, it'll be because I've put that money as much as I can into the travel, because so that's one way that she has influenced what is happening on this campus today.
So that leads me to a question. What should a graduate student see as the graduate student experience beyond the classroom? And when we're talking about, I'm thinking about like traveling to conferences, attending colloquia, things of that nature. What is different about the graduate student experience beyond just sitting in the room?
Yeah, and that one's actually hard, because for so many, not just in communication, but across this campus, the vast majority of our graduate students are part-time graduate students, and they are working professionals. And so you say, oh, well, they won't have time for that. I have to tell you, I had a number of the students the first student that I sent to a conference, and I was so naive at the time that we didn't realize that we probably shouldn't have had a beginning master's students apply, because everybody else was doctoral students on the panel. It was the public address debut panel that she was accepted for, and it was a master's student who worked full time and still says it's one of the more important experiences of her life. So anyone should be able to avail themselves of that. But we do have to be thoughtful about how we weave those opportunities in for folks. So if we can do the professional development, the academic conferences are great. Now, we're getting better stuff virtually. So there are ways that we don't necessarily have to go. I mean, people are doing fairly well with that. We did a Council of Graduate Schools Dean's Institute last week virtually, and I have to say there were some great sessions. And then we're actually going to do some learning communities. So look at different options. There's some great professional development locally. We've had some of the regional conferences here in Omaha, so you can do that. But also when you look at PRSA, when you look at some of those other things, connecting to those professional organizations, the campus does have a lot of resources. I mean, whether they're speakers or they're speakers, they're people who are coming in, workshops, trying to connect with those, I think, as much as people can. But it goes back to Mike's point, though, about integrating what you do, right? Because, and the same thing's true with faculty, right? You can't do everything that's out there. How is it that it integrates, like either with my particular courses, my research project, some of those types of things. So I think being strategic, but it's like scanning the environment, finding resources that are out there, whether they're locally or nationally, and then seeing how they relate. Don't make them something that's other than, but make them fit into what it is that you're doing. And I know that the school has kinds of things, like if faculty are presenting their research, that's a great kind of thing. to get involved with something like that, or if there's something over in the CEC, or relevant departments, right? Whether it's over in PA or the work that's going to be done with the counterterrorism. There's going to be some lot of really good things that are very much here that maybe can relate to what people are doing.
Cool. Other thoughts from you two on that idea?
I think the only thing I would add would be, to not ignore some of what's going on at the undergraduate level, because the undergraduate students and the faculty involved with those students are often looking for someone with expertise to help. I can think of examples for when we would do election coverage from this very studio, and we would have not a large number, but several graduate students who maybe they're not interested in broadcasting, but they're interested in journalism or in political science, and they would bring to the group some expertise that the undergraduates would need.
That's a good point.
And we were able to use that. So it's everything that Deb said, but don't look too far outside your own circle.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Hugh, thoughts at all? Or?
Yeah, I kind of piggybacking on what Mike just said is that one of the things that I discovered, and I don't know how typical my story was, but it was about 10 years between my undergrad and the time I went back to grad school. And I discovered I was a much better student as a grad student than I had been as an undergrad. But one of the reasons for that was that everybody in grad school wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Everybody, they were interested. They wanted to talk to you about stuff outside of class. It wasn't like, oh God, I got to go to so-and-so's class. It was like, oh yeah, what are we going to talk about today? And the interest and the passion and all those sorts of things that I think you have. For several years after I finished my master's degree, I would meet on a regular basis with people, 4 or 5 of us that had formed our own cohort, and had taken classes together, and that friendship endured afterwards. So I think that's a distinct difference between, you do have friends in undergrad you take a lot of courses with, but in grad school you bump it up another level because you need each other's help.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part when you think about, you're saying outside the classroom.
Yep.
It is some of the stuff that you do yourself because you've got people operating at a higher level who have a passion for similar types of things, so that you actually create some of those opportunities among your group as well. So that's a really good point, Hugh.
All right. Excellent. The last question I really want to ask is, we are in the reality of COVID, right? And so, given everything you know about graduate students and about graduate education, as a new graduate student coming back this fall, after what happened last spring, over the summer, what advice would you have for students who are going to be in this very, transitional or different kind of space this fall, as far as what they should expect? What advice would you say? What would you tell them about it?
Well, I would say don't overlook the obvious, and by that I mean how many research possibilities are being generated by COVID-19.
That's true.
Again, you can do research that's based in history. You can also do research that's based in current events.
Yeah.
And what we're living through right now will be written about for future generations. Don't need to sound like the old guy, but I have been here 33 years, so whatever. But there's some opportunities there.
Okay.
And so think about that. And how we're having to do things will impact how we do things going forward, even once we're to the other side of coronavirus.
That makes sense. I've been thinking about what I often see as a target-rich opportunity whenever an event happens, and think how many people have been journaling, how many people have been doing video journals, how many people have been just writing things down here and there. Sarpy County is starting an archival project as we speak right now. I think Douglas County is doing the same thing.
We have it at the library.
And we have one happening here.
They've started it right away here at UNO.
So imagine what those archives, even for a researcher, a graduate student right now, might show us. Not with hindsight, but in being inside the space. Our connection with UNMC and health communication, their connection with counterterrorism program that is a project that is launching or has launched at UNO. All of these things are interwoven right now, and I think to your point, there is something happening, And one of the best ways you can help yourself make sense of it is almost to remove yourself one space and become the scholar and the researcher, looking back on it or looking into it. I think that might not just generate a thesis or a project, but also help internalize and make sense of what's going on too.
I think all the new technologies that we now have available, all the different ways we communicate that have been amplified because of the COVID-19.
Right.
Because we haven't had the opportunities for the one-on-one, face-to-face kind of communication. I think those are all, like Dean Hilt said, those are all rich areas to explore for potential theses or projects.
Excellent.
So yeah, I agree with this, and I'm really glad that you thought about it. I think the other part about what I've been experiencing when I look through like spring and summer, and I'm sure going forward, is it really emphasizes to me more than ever the critical nature of communication as a discipline. Mm-hmm. Because there are any number of meetings and things that I'm in that where I'm starting, I talk about how do we communicate this effectively. Right. Maybe who are our target? I mean, it is fundamentals, but I mean, sometimes I feel like, Mike's heard me occasionally, that I may be, you may think I'm teaching a class, but it's really important that if we don't get the right audiences, if we don't have the right messages, if we don't know who's doing what when, if we don't be totally transparent, It is the fundamentals. So I guess for me, that's one of the things that I see is in all of this, the value of what this about experts in this area can contribute to helping us manage through, get through, but also get better, because it will be different. And there are some things, there's some things that we've made some changes with that we'll never go back. We don't want to, right? Mm-hmm. We've done this amazing program this summer for incoming new faculty that I hope we offer every single year. We should have been doing this for years, right? The online, the onboarding type of thing, it's great. And we're going to have, for the graduate students, there's going to be, we're going to do a virtual orientation, but we'll have the Canvas site for them. We'll do that for GA. So that's going to be not just that one shot. So if you can't be there, the resources will be there. Right. So there's some things that we're doing that we needed to do, and it just bumped us along. But some other advice, and again, I think it relates to communication, is flexibility. I mean, I was joking, and it's not the best scale, and it's really old, and it's not great data, so you probably don't want to go out and do your thesis on this, so I'm putting all those caveats out there. But I love the tolerance of ambiguity scale, okay? And then part of it is just the concept of that, about how people are able to deal with that, and whether or not you just kind of, if I know where you are, I can help target how I'm going to help you, right, through this. So just from a conceptual type of thing. But we need to be flexible with ambiguity. Things are going to change. And if we have an expectation or our mindset on a particular thing, the level of how you react to that. Right. So trying to create that internal kind of flexibility, I think, is really important. And the other thing, though, is I've been enormously proud of how well UNO, the students, the faculty, the staff, have been able to adapt to this. We're getting better with whether it's online or by Zoom, or how do we create connections, because it can be done. Right. We just have to work at it really intentionally. And I think just being open to that level of experimentation in order to make it work.
Excellent. Thank you, all of you, for coming in. I know that schedules are crazy busy in the summer when it comes to administration, so I appreciate you taking a little time coming on and do this, because we can't meet, face to face, that Saturday, in August. I thought this was the best way to do it. Plus, we get to capture some ideas that may not get captured at that moment. I think that our histories are going to help us make sense of and make decisions on the next steps. And I think what we've talked about today is going to help us start generating, okay, what does the next 10, 20, 30 years look like? So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.